Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Ryan. I'm the president here at LaunchPad Lab, and I'm joined today by my partner and, frankly, one of the smartest people I've ever met, Brendan. So, Brendan, I'm going to let you just kind of introduce yourself a little bit.
That was not in our practice session that you would say that. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Brendan, CTO at Launchpad. So definitely focus more on the technical side, but alongside Ryan, been really exploring the AI space, maybe most notably over the last year or so, just with all the advancements. So we're excited to kind of share, what we've seen play out and what we think some of the trends are, and try to really bring that down to sort of practical business use cases, which I think sometimes it's a little hard to reconcile some of the hype against sort of the sort of practical and realistic use cases. So yeah, excited to share what we've seen so far over the last year.
Yeah, sounds good. And yeah, just a little background on kind of why we're doing this. Brendan definitely just alluded to this, but really the last year or so, we've been consulting and sort of advising our clients on generative AI and just, all this hype that's happened really over the last year since ChatGPT was introduced back in, October, November of last year. And so a big part of what we do at Launchpad is really ultimately finding opportunities for our clients to drive business outcomes, which is typically going to be either driving revenue, reducing costs, or just improving the quality of their service and customer experience. And so while there's a lot of hype on AI, we were noticing that for a lot of our clients, they were sort of struggling to understand how to turn that into actual business outcomes. So really excited to share, sort of the culmination of the last year of our efforts on this front, and just some of the things that we've really been seeing work well. And frankly, a lot of the things we'll walk through today have the opportunity to drive, a lot of the use cases have the opportunity to drive, 7-figure business value. So really exciting use cases, but they're practical. They're things that you can pursue today. They're things that we've been able to test and explore and build POCs around with our clients. All right. So what's behind the hype? There's been, we see in technology all the time, there's always some type of a hype cycle happening. We've seen AI have hype cycles in the past, and this is like a new kind of cycle of hype around AI. But ultimately, there's a few good reasons for this hype. And so a lot of our content today, and really our focus today, is really talking about GPT-4. And the reason why we're specifically focused on GPT-4 is because GPT-4 really has emerged as the market leader in large language models. And it's standing head and shoulders above all of the other large language models as it currently stands today. This could obviously change, and by the time someone maybe watches a recording of this webinar, who knows who the market leader will be. These things are changing very rapidly. Open source LLMs are coming up very rapidly. But OpenAI's GPT-4 really is a groundbreaking technology, and there's 4 big reasons why this is creating so much hype and excitement and opportunity in the technology space. The first is the ease of integration. And so up until OpenAI really released their GPT API, in order to build and deploy a large language model, it took quite a bit of effort for organizations to do this. They'd have to have machine learning and AI experts on staff that are building, custom rolling these models and deploying them to cloud-based environments. And oftentimes it could take a year or even longer to bring one of these LLMs to a point where you could actually, ship some type of feature or functionality that delivered business value. So that cost of entry was really high. OpenAI, what they really did that was game changing in this regard is they built sort of a developer first API that makes it really easy for developers like myself and Brendan to just start integrating with their large language model. So in a couple lines of code, you can actually start to create value from this large language model. So just greatly reducing that barrier to entry on these LLMs. The second big benefit with GPT-4 is its ability to adhere to prompts. When ChatGPT first came out back in November, that itself showed a huge increase in ability to adhere to prompts. But when GPT-4 came out in March, this ability leapt forward in a major way. So now we're able to, when we instruct the AI in a prompt, we're able to get more consistent results from that. And when you have an AI that isn't consistent, but doesn't consistently adhere to your prompts, you end up with inconsistent outputs from it. And as a result, like any business system that has inconsistent outputs is like pretty not very useful. I'll put it that way. And so for business practical use cases, we need a AI that can really adhere to the prompts well, so we can have confidence that it's going to, follow through in the way that we want it to, and sort of perform the actions that we want in the way that we want it to. So the third big piece is the mastery of unstructured information. So as a programmer, unstructured information is like my nemesis, right? I've been programming for 10 years, and ever since I started programming, the first thing that you try to do is build a structured database to work off of. So you know what fields and field types you're working with. Is this a date? Is this a string? What are we working with here? And unstructured information is really challenging as a programmer, because it's just really difficult to know where to find certain data within that unstructured information and in what format it's going to be in. And really up until this point, technology's just kind of not been good with unstructured information, frankly. But so much of our world is frankly unstructured information. We communicate with language. We have PDFs and these unstructured documents that we're working with every day. And GPT-4 is amazing with unstructured information. It's basically the way that GPT-4 kind of thinks and processes is with unstructured information. And so this mastery of unstructured information allows for use cases that weren't possible prior to this technology being introduced. So there's a lot of business processes that all of us, any business that's been around for a few years, has built up to deal with unstructured information, usually humans dealing with that now we're able to say, hey, do we really need to do business the way we have been? Or could we use this technology to change the way that we work, to focus more on our customers, more on our clients, and less on, sort of moving data around and pulling data out of PDFs and things like that. The last, but certainly not least, is the ability for GPT-4 to perform advanced reasoning. This is something that has been shocking to me as a developer and someone who's been in the technology space for a long time. I never thought we would really see AI get to the point where it has in terms of advanced reasoning. But there's no question that it can perform at a high level in this regard. And that's really evidenced by some of the tests that OpenAI has put this technology through. So here you can see on this screen, a chart on the bottom right that really shows the exam results across a number of challenging standardized tests for GPT-4. So GPT-4 has outperformed humans on most of these tests that you see here. So you see this is the bar exam. GPT-4 scored in the 90th percentile in the uniform bar exam. You see tough exams like the LSAT, SAT math. So the ability for GPT to not only deal with unstructured information, but actually like understand what the question is in one of these exams and think through the answer and actually problem solve that is really fascinating and really something that can be game changing from a technology standpoint. And so the way that you can think about this is we basically have our first on-demand intelligence that you can tap into at scale in a cheap and very fast way. And so you have this like fundamental sort of paradigm shift where intelligence up until this point has been something that has been pretty much, bottled up in humans. You have to hire people to be able to tap into intelligence. Now we can tap into intelligence with a few lines of code, right? And you can do that at scale and in a way that's much cheaper than it would be to, tap into humans. I don't want to say that like this is better than humans or something like that. It's definitely not the case. It's not able to perform the types of things that humans are, as far as swivel chairing and things like that. But for a lot of use cases, it actually is quite competent and quite capable. And so we're going to dig into what those use cases are today to sort of get your brains, kind of turning on that regard. So when we talk about tapping into GPT-4 at scale, what we're really talking about is their API. I think a lot of people, when they hear the term ChatGPT, they think about the app that you can go to and sort of interact with. It's a chat experience. You can go in and ask it questions, and it's kind of creepy how it basically seems like you're talking to a human that immediately responds. And the ChatGPT app is certainly useful from a personal work standpoint, things like that. But when we're talking about business outcomes and changing your profit margins or increasing your revenue, what we're really talking about there is the API side of things. The API allows us to integrate GPT-4 into your technology stack, right? Whether that be your internal facing technology, like your CRM, or your external facing technology, like your website, your portal, your apps. And so the API can really be embedded and integrated with your whole tech stack to start to make your business run smoother, smarter, faster, and more efficiently. And there's really two kind of general types of use cases that, as we get in and we'll start getting into specific use cases, but there's two big buckets that we're seeing. And this is certainly not comprehensive, but these are the two big buckets that we're seeing as far as practical use cases with the technology right now. The first is one-to-one personalization. And so up until this point, as programmers, for myself, we kind of been working off of the assumption that computers are not smart. We know that machines are dumb. And so when we program up experiences, whether that's a web-based experience or an app, any type of user experience, we're pre-programming all of the rules of that experience, what the form fields are, what happens when someone mistypes a certain, accidentally mistypes their phone number and things like that. With AI, that's all kind of changing, where now instead of pre-programming every experience and having every person drop into the same experience, now we can have individualized experiences and allow the intelligence of the AI to come through in the user experience. So that takes the form of like an intelligent chatbot experience, where someone can come in and the AI can curate that experience based on the conversation they're having with the customer. That can take the form of personalized marketing. You see with some of the amazing AI happening in CRMs like Salesforce, there's all sorts of opportunity to personalize communication with customers, leveraging GPT right from within CRMs like Salesforce. And then on the second piece here, you have process automation. And this is really about fundamentally looking at the fact that your business processes were built around technology that now is kind of old. Now we have this new technology that's providing new opportunities. How do you look at the way that you perform your business, all of your business processes, and look for areas where, hey, we no longer need a person doing that. Now we can automate that or at least speed up their process by injecting AI. All right. So without further ado, we'll jump in and start to show, some actual business use cases and kind of get into some demos. So the first use case, and this is like the most obvious use case for this technology, is intelligent chatbots. Chatbots have been around for a long time. We've seen probably most of us here have experienced a chatbot at some point and probably were sort of let down by that experience. Frankly, chatbots up until GPT-4 have just not been very good. They're very brittle. They're rule-based systems where you pre-program the different branches of communication that you want a chatbot to go through. But with GPT, these experiences are going to become much more advanced, much more intricate, and much more capable. And so there's going to be really awesome opportunities across both sales and support. So on the sales side, we'll be able to use chatbots to increase the percentage of people who are interested in our product who end up buying. On the support side, we'll be able to reduce the number of agents that we'll need to handle the support volume that we have. So, as your support volume goes up, you might not have to hire as many agents because you're able to just handle so much more of those requests automatically with the AI. Not to mention probably improving that customer experience with faster response times. And so on the sales side, the way that this is really made possible is really up until GPT, it's been very difficult to move between unstructured information, like natural language, and structured information, like our database, our CRM data, right? But with GPT, they have a feature called function calling that basically allows our technology, like your technology stack, to communicate with ChatGPT and share structured data between those two systems. So as ChatGPT is having a conversation with a customer and collecting information like their name or their email or what product they're interested in, we can take that data and store it in a structured format, like like a lead in our CRM, for example. So picture any place where there's like forms online. Those are possible places where you might say, hey, instead of having this form-based process, we're going to inject a conversational experience using ChatGPT. On the support side, think about anywhere where you have a portal or some place that people are going to kind of manage their account and their experience with you. That experience, the whole experience could be a chat experience. Certainly that could be, chat could be a component of that experience, right? And so capabilities are really pretty amazing with these chatbots, and definitely kind of next level as far as intelligence here. So I want to show an example of a chatbot. This is a chatbot we built for this demo purpose. It's imagine LaunchPad Lab has decided to pivot. We're no longer a digital product agency. Now we're going to be a hair salon. So this is our chatbot for our hair salon. So basically imagine that a customer comes into the site and is looking to book an appointment, and we introduce this chat experience, right? So, hi there, what type of appointment would you like to book? I'm going to say haircut. Great choice. When would you like to book your appointment for your haircut? I go with 2 p.m. or I'll say tomorrow. Let's go with tomorrow. So perfect. We have the following times available. And so you can pick a time that works. I'll just kind of put in like 3:30 works best for me. So you can see here, I'm responding with natural language. I'm not even formatting, the time correctly. Like I don't have a colon in here, but the AI is smart enough to sort of like understand what I mean and responds, excellent. Your haircut appointment is scheduled for 3:30 p.m. on October 5th. May I have your full name, please? Give the name. Thank you. Lastly, can I have your phone number so we can contact you for any updates related to your appointment? So here, I'll just kind of intentionally fat finger this and put a letter in the number. So you'll see the AI picks up on the fact that I put a letter in here, understands that that's not a valid phone number, and actually responds with, I'm sorry, but it doesn't seem like, it seems like there might be a typo. Can you please provide your number again? Make sure it consists of numbers. So ordinarily in a typical form as a developer, I'd have to write some code to make sure that the number meets some validation criteria. Now I can just depend on the AI to kind of do that validation check for me, which is pretty nice. So here I'll put the phone number in. And here we go, haircut is booked. Now, a couple of things I'll add in here as this is going is, the AI is actually able to, with that function calling feature, is actually able to fetch the available appointments for a specific date. So someone says, I'm interested in, tomorrow, or even if I wanted to, it could list out days and times available. And so you can have this interaction happen between the chat experience and your backend. And you can build all sorts of different flows with that function calling feature there. Great, your appointment is booked. We look forward to seeing you soon. Now I'm going to go ahead and refresh this and scroll down. Here you can see the data that our system was able to collect from ChatGPT after this session was concluded. So we were able to capture the appointment date, the phone number, the appointment time, the service type, and the name of the customer. So you can imagine this is in JSON. This can be easily shoved into Salesforce, for example, as a lead, or or into, probably this would go into a POS system as a new appointment, right? So just to kind of demonstrate. And so that interplay of being able to go from conversational data, I even said 3:30 works best for me. It was able to turn that into a specific timestamp that our backend database can take in and store in the database, that's friendly to a structured database. So that's when you think about that mastery of unstructured data, this is kind of what I mean, being able to turn that unstructured information into structured or vice versa. So to give you an example of what kind of an architecture have we been sort of deploying and looking at for this, that chatbot example there, this is a good example of what that architecture might look like. Maybe you have Salesforce as your CRM, and anytime a customer comes into that chat experience, you're piping them into your CRM. We have Heroku where we would host that chat experience, and Heroku would have the database where we're storing that structured data as we're collecting it. We also have an application framework. We like Ruby on Rails. There's a bunch, could be Node.js, could be a bunch of different application frameworks here. And then ultimately OpenAI's API that's actually providing the logic as far as what messages to send to the user on behalf of the AI. All right, I'm gonna pause and hand it over to Brendan and let Brendan run through a couple more use cases. So,
cool, thanks. Yeah, and I think the ones that I'll be covering kind of fit again a little bit more into that sort of process automation or optimization sort of bucket that we said at the beginning. So one of the common paradigms out here that AI is pretty useful for something called smart search. It actually has a lot of different names, which is probably definitely confusing if you read any sort of articles out in the wild. But fundamentally, what we've sort of alluded to thus far is that these sort of baseline models, particularly GPT-4, have the capabilities to work through different structure processes. But what they don't necessarily have is access to proprietary data or your data. And because of that, they can be sort of very aloof or not aware of information that's very, very important. And Ryan kind of expresses a little bit in the sense that the AI can talk to your sort of appointment database to sort of be able to retrieve that information. It didn't have access to that and didn't know about that, wouldn't be very effective at booking appointments. So smart search is really the ability to sort of marry up the intelligence of AI to a data set that's really relevant to your business. And it's important to be intentional about that and sort of restrict that. There's a lot of sensitivity around AI having access to certain information, but it can be done in a pretty responsible way to unlock a lot of potential. And we'll kind of walk through this here. So the one on the left is something we refer to as a knowledge base. So a lot of companies have sort of a compendium of a lot of knowledge articles and reference articles that can be really, really helpful, but they're kind of hard to retrieve or uncover. And being able to hook AI into that set of knowledge articles can really provide a powerful interface for querying that information in I think, as Ryan showed there in the previous example, a pretty intuitive and conversational interface. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a very structured conversation. It can be a little bit more free flowing. We'll kind of go through that in the next slide. The other one is really just the ability to perform research and analysis within the data that you have, either that's structured or unstructured. And this can really help when companies are looking to generate new reports or uncover new insights. Not necessarily something that has to be done an annual report basis, but when companies are sort of looking to sort of mine their data to try to compile new reports, that's a lot of heavy lifting to sort of research all that and find it and uncover it. And this sort of smart search paradigm can be really powerful and sort of accelerate that. And I think it's important to know a lot of the scenarios we're describing here are there's still a human involved here. It's not the AI is going to write the report or that the AI has all this information. usually a human is interacting with it to sort of like tap into that. In that way too, like sometimes we call it like a second brain. Like you have this sort of augmented thing that you can connect to. You can go to that next slide, Ryan. So to try to like really like crystallize this idea, because I think it's a, skews a little bit more like esoteric in nature, is I think we can imagine like the idea of, field agents that are conducting service calls, and they need access to like technical information. Maybe they're servicing a certain appliance or something like that. And, ultimately they need a user manual. And, as it's probably true of most people, like they kind of throw away the user manual or don't have it. And it's very hard to sort of retrieve that information. So, we can imagine a like field agent tool where they could have a chat interface to really like query and look at like kind of their compendium of knowledge, which could be user manuals. So maybe they're working on a specific piece of equipment, and they need to know sort of what the like sort of power ratings are, because they need to service it and it's having issues. And they could kind of quickly retrieve that information and continue the conversation where maybe they get the power ratings, but they need to know additional information, or like, hey, this is a certain year of the equipment, whatever it might be. They can kind of that continue that information. So this slide has a lot going on here, but in terms of some of the like pictures you'll see here, is it really sort of lays out like how do we like get to this point? Because if you go to ChatGPT or any experience like that and start asking it about this information, like it probably won't know. And what we can do essentially is, on the left side there, we need to essentially index or create a vector representation of like all of those user manuals in this case, to sort of have all this information available. And then ultimately when this sort of query is run on the right, the AI can sort of say, all right, like I'm going to go search that database and find what might be relevant, and then present it back to the technician in this case in a like pretty human friendly way. And that, can sort of build upon the conversation. So again, it's not just like a single question and answer sort of format. It could really be extended to be more of a conversation where, as a technician is potentially working on a piece of equipment, they might have like additional questions that come up where, there's already some context awareness of, what model we might be servicing and things like that. So again, I think that definitely needs to be a responsible way to sort of provide this data to AI, but being able to sort of like tap into that underlying intelligence and then sort of give it like sort of access to the proprietary information can produce like pretty powerful experiences. Go to the next one, Ryan. So another one we'll see pretty commonly is, what we refer to maybe as automated evaluations. And I think, the general thing I would say here, and Ryan spoke to this a little bit earlier, a lot of these, evaluation and approval flows, like they have a lot of steps in them. And I don't know if it's prudent or, really even correct to think about AI like taking over all those steps and just running the whole process. But it can be quite powerful to think about certain steps in these flows that AI could accelerate, particularly the ones that might be like very like time intensive. So I think that's kind of, where these like two use cases come from. So, one like paradigm we've seen like play out pretty generally is just, with insurance claims. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of documentation to sort of read and understand, what the nature is of this request. And being able to kind of perform some level of analysis to figure out like, does this qualify, is pretty helpful. Again, it doesn't necessarily like check all the boxes in that workflow, but can accelerate a pretty crucial piece of it. Another one is just around like triaging in general. So there's kind of the ability to sort of, interface directly with the customer via chat interface, which Ryan showed. But there's also just the, hey, we have a call center or we have some sort of like customer service request coming in, the volume is high. How do we sort of classify these different requests coming in? If we let the customers do that, they'll probably rate everything as like top priority, which is, helpful information, but, maybe the AI can sort of scan some of these requests and help the current team of agents like be able to process requests faster and, focus on like kind of the highest priority items. So that's another like pretty powerful paradigm. Again, it's not necessarily handling the full like customer service request for you, but it's taking a pretty crucial piece and trying to sort of accelerate it and give the agent team, much more of an ability to kind of focus on like the sort of the human element, or it's like subjective element of things. Go to the next one, Ryan. We're going to walk through like a demo. This is again kind of one we built just for the sake of today's webinar around this sort of insurance claim process. And it's going to be an auto insurance claim, which I guess hopefully is familiar to people, but maybe hopefully not in a way. But really what we have are sort of two inputs to this process, where we have kind of the demand letter or something that sort of states like what happened, what are the facts about like the collision or the accident that happened. And then, for the person that's insured, like what sort of policy do they have on file that essentially we're trying to understand from like in a claims adjustment process, like do they even qualify? And if so, like, what are some of the parameters around that? So, this isn't meant to say like, oh, well, the AI will just, handle the whole like claims process, but like to get an initial determination or initial analysis, particularly maybe from like the initial request from a someone that's insured, can be like quite powerful for like accelerating the overall workflow. Go to the next slide. So this is a quick like demo that we recorded. And, ultimately this is probably run in like a background process. So it'll go kind of fast here, but I'll like show the output on the following screen, but you can click through it, Ryan, and sort of show it. But basically the AI here is, ingesting that demand letter and sort of creating, list and an understanding of like the state of facts around this collision. And then the analysis portion here sort of takes that, those state of facts and looks at the insurance policy and tries to make a initial determination. Probably helpful to go to the next slide just because it's like hard to move the scroll wheel. So what we did is we kind of extracted that text that was printed out and put it here. So again, this is kind of like a draft analysis, but it was able to determine that the insurer was involved in auto collision, and the policy that they have provides coverage for bodily injury as well as like property damage. And this is sort of a sample policy from Allstate that we found online, but the policy states that it would be legally obligated to pay for the case of bodily injury. And in this case, there are reported injuries to head, neck, and shoulder. So that's kind of essentially the rationale for why Allstate would be needing to pay damages here. But it also notes at the bottom there that there's a limit to the coverage on this policy. If these injuries sustained and kind of like impact to work or medical bills was higher than 20,000, like that might be the cap. So this would hopefully again sort of accelerate the claims adjustment process to allow the claims adjusters to sort of like work through a higher volume of requests, or sort of move forward with this understanding to sort of the next stage in the process, such that again they could provide a more like consistent response structure and ideally like a faster response time to the overall process. I think the next slide is yours. Okay, yeah. So those are the examples I'll run through, and I'll hand it back to Ryan to cover out the last few here.
Yeah, sounds good. So document parsing is probably like the least sexy use case, but it's also got a lot of business practicality. So, one of the big challenges with document parsing has been that a lot of times these parsers are very brittle. Like you have to sort of tell the parser exactly what text to look for within a document in order. So for example, like say you want to pull date of birth, like the birth date of someone out of a PDF, prior to now, you'd really have to sort of have the AI look for the text birth date or date of birth, and then look for any text to the right of that and try to pull it out. And so they're inherently very brittle. A PDF might come in a different format, and instead of using the word date of birth, maybe it's just DOB or birth date. And so you end up running into these challenges with trying to, in a programmatic way, extract structured data from unstructured documents like PDFs. What we've seen with GPT-4 is that it's actually really great with these unstructured PDFs. And instead of having to direct the AI to specific text and things like that, you can just tell it what you're looking to pull out of the document. So you can just say, AI, we're looking to pull out, the birth date, and it will look through and it will understand that DOB means date of birth, or date of birth and birth date mean the same thing, right? And it can figure out that there's a date nearby that and pull it out. And so we've seen a lot of success with basically being able to use GPT-4 to automate any type of like data entry, data processing around unstructured documents like PDFs. And sort of the inverse of this. So if you think about, on one hand, GPT being able to ingest unstructured data and then output structured data from it, you also have the inverse available, which is to ingest structured data and output unstructured information from it. So think about report generation as being that inverse, right? Where you could take the data you have in your database, or in really any type of system there, and ultimately have the AI assist with report generation. So that might be creating an executive summary based on data in your system. That might be producing some type of like personalized document based on data in a system about a customer. So there's all sorts of use cases here with like report generation. And certainly we're seeing, like, for example, with technologies like Tableau is rolling out a feature like this with GPT, where you can get insights in kind of a conversational way with GPT on data that Tableau is aggregating from a business intelligence standpoint. So a lot of really great use cases around like kind of report generation as well. So I want to spend some time talking about a topic that I think is just top of mind for most of the business leaders we're talking to, especially as we start to really get into, okay, we've really defined a project. We know it's going to deliver massive value to the organization, but there's always this kind of moral challenge here of like humans versus AI. We're seeing AI starting to kind of encroach on human territory a bit more, like, tasks that traditionally only humans have been able to do. Now we're seeing that AI is starting to do some of those tasks. I think this is definitely like a big conversation, a conversation that everyone should be having. But what I would say, and my advice to business leaders is that, like, as a business owner, as a business leader, you have a responsibility to run a performant organization and to stay ahead of your competition. So as you think about like, some of the trade-off and kind of nuance in this decision here, I definitely think that, there's also a cost to not innovating, a cost to not adopting technologies that can help your business work better. And so, it's definitely a complex sort of moral issue here, but I think ultimately, the best way you can protect the humans in your company, the people on your team, is by making sure that your business is operating at the highest level. I think at this point, not adopting this technology, could be creating more of a risk for your organization than helping, right? I'm not looking at ways to use this. And so, yeah, I think it's definitely a complex issue. I do think that, at the end of the day, none of us individually can control whether or not AI exists. We can really only determine how much we're going to adopt it in our organizations. And I do think it's important to just be thinking about, like, staying ahead of the curve, making sure you're ahead of your competition, and ultimately building the best possible company that you can. So in terms of like how to, like, let's say you're sitting on this webinar and you're like, this is very interesting, kind of curious how this actually relates to my organization, or if maybe one or two of these use cases caught your eye, like how that might actually manifest and turn into something that's like in production and actually delivering business value. There's really a 3-step process that we go through with our clients here. The first step is what we call our opportunity assessment. And this is where we're going to basically put our strategy and consulting hats on with you and look at the way your business is functioning. So everything from sales to your operations to even back office parts of your business, we'll take a look at where we think there are opportunities for AI to free your people up and to hopefully drive revenue as well. And so the opportunity assessment is really about, bringing an outside consultant who is an expert in this area to take a fresh look at your business and how it's operating and identify opportunities to inject AI to create efficiency and honestly just to deliver ROI to the organization. Once we do that opportunity assessment, sort of the output of that is a list of opportunities, projects, and the anticipated ROI attached to those projects. How much, what's the cost to implement? What's the cost of the AI and the technology involved? And what's the outcome? What's either cost savings or revenue that this is going to drive? And we're sort of going to work with you to prioritize the top ROI project. What's the lowest effort but highest reward project that we can start with? And then the next step there is to build a POC and sort of de-risk that project, make sure that the AI is reaching a level of feasibility that's acceptable to ultimately deliver that ROI. From there, once everyone's comfortable with the performance, we've ran that analysis. Now we're moving into the build mode, and that's where we're fully integrating that AI into your system and deploying it, training your people if that's part of if it's an internal facing thing, or making sure that user experience is easily accessible to your customers and the users who should be using it. So that's kind of the 3 high-level steps there. And really it all starts with that initial opportunity assessment and just identifying those opportunities within your organization. So with that, obviously LaunchPad, we're here to do this, to help our clients identify these opportunities. That's for me personally, it's been a big part of what I've been doing over the last year or so, and it's just a lot of fun. There's a lot of really amazing, interesting applications of this technology. So if you're interested in chatting, with me, with my team, definitely would love to book a conversation and, have like a 30-minute call on it and just see if it makes sense to chat more. But yeah, feel free to, there's like a QR code here, pull out your phones and hit that if you want to just book a meeting. Or definitely don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn or however you'd like. So yeah, definitely appreciate your time. And yeah, I think we're going to open it up for Q&A at this point. It looks like we do have quite a few questions in here. So give me a moment to digest them.
I've had a chance to look at some of these, Ryan, while you were talking. So
that'd be great. If you want to jump
I can maybe
please.
start top down.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so I'll kind of just recap the question. So just in general, kind of security around GPT-4, especially given that, the rise in like cyber threats in general, how does the GPT-4 platform ensure, data is secure and protected from potential breaches? Yeah, so we don't necessarily have any like proprietary inside information, from OpenAI, but they've published a lot. I think they have a like trust.openai.com site that sort of details a lot of their like compliance and security protocols that they adhere to. So that's definitely a good place to reference. We probably could share that link out after this. But, even with all those, like, nothing is like completely infallible. But one thing we maybe didn't really talk about earlier is particularly in a lot of these API integrations, the like standard policy for OpenAI with GPT-4 is that any data that is sort of sent into their system is not used for training purposes and is deleted within 30 days. So as a standard policy there, like, the idea of having, data exposed to a breach, like in kind of a long run is, pretty limited. There's even, options to sort of have like a zero retention policy in place with them. That's more of sort of an enterprise arrangement. But they've done, work over the last year, particularly to publish a lot more information around that. And particularly through the API interface, the, deletion of data as sort of a standard is pretty helpful in this realm. Still needs to be like strongly considered, but I think that alleviates potentially a lot of like longer term concerns.
And And I would just add, and I know there's an evolving ecosystem here. I know Salesforce is doing a ton in this regard on the trust side of things. And so if you're leveraging Salesforce, and they're doing a bunch to make sure that that data is being sort of desanitized. As Microsoft has a partnership with OpenAI, and so for HIPAA compliant situations where you need to have an application that's meeting HIPAA compliance, you can do that with Azure's OpenAI partnership there. And it's actually pretty straightforward, and the cost structure is the same as like or close to the same. I think it is the same. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Brendan, as the sort of the more the Open AI or the Open API approach. So yeah, that's been great to see, just those partnerships with Microsoft, Salesforce, and you can see that these companies are really like focused on security. They understand that for this technology to have business practicality, it needs to be secure, needs to have the ability to be private, and for data to be deleted and not like used to train the model. So those are all really positive things. So there's a couple questions that I think, Brennan, this one's a good one for you to take, like related to the claims processing use case. Does the company or user have the ability to provide rules for ChatGPT to follow in order to get a certain outcome, recommendation or final output? I don't know if you want to talk about, some of the ways that you can influence the AI and the results of it.
Yeah. So in terms of like, what we're doing kind of somewhat behind the scenes to produce some of the outputs we've shown today is, really through this like prompt interface. And the prompt interface is like kind of like, essentially like human English language there. And that's really the entry point to sort of influence and instruct the model on what we're trying to do. So again, like if you're sort of providing instructions for someone to do something, the more vague those are, or the less clear they are, the more likely there is things to be interpreted the wrong way and then kind of get the wrong output. So a lot of the effort, in arriving at the outputs is just something generally called to prompt engineering. So trying to build these prompts in a way that can be like reliably produce the outputs. And in that prompt, you can put the rules essentially that we want the GPT interface to adhere to. And there's different like tactics and techniques to sort of influence that. Sometimes giving the AI like some examples of what you're expecting to see can be really, really helpful, so that it kind of knows what target is trying to get to. There's additional things that can be done to sort of fine tune the model, but those get more advanced technically, more cost intensive. But sort of at a base level, really building those prompts and iterating on those prompts in a way can really like produce like the reliable output. And that's really where like probably those initial rule sets would be included, and don't require like building your own model. And I think that kind of encapsulates a lot of the value we've seen is you don't have to go so far as like rolling your own model to get that. You can use the prompting techniques to rapidly iterate on that to get that output.
Yeah, and another person asked, do you see businesses being able to use GPT-4 out of the box, or do many need to create their own models? So, I don't know if you want to take that one, Brennan. I think maybe we can go. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to that a little bit there.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking.
The prompt iteration we talked about is sort of like outside of the model. That's just like writing better instructions on how to do what we want it to do. Right. So in that case, like usually there's like a lot of potential and like impact that can be had just through prompt iteration and not really touching the internals of the model. So I would say like it depends on the use case and those sorts of things, but like most of the time you get pretty darn far with sort of the prompt iteration. The sort of like next level up from there is trying to essentially like fine tune a model where you take like GPT-4, for example, or another version of that model, and you give it some, 100 examples of like what you're trying to have it do, and you would essentially fine tune that model. So that's like a step more advanced. But like, honestly, we've seen the prompt iteration really check the box a lot, and kind of is the preferred method because of like sort of the cheap iteration you get from it. You're not sort of touching any of the internals of the model. But that's not to be said that like there aren't limitations of that and you can go further with that. But I think in terms of that like proof of concept step that Ryan was showing, a lot of that is essentially through like the prompt iteration and not necessarily like standing up a unique model. But every use case is a bit different. But yeah, I guess kind of TLDR, I would say, is you can get pretty far with the prompts.
I think too, just to add in there with the prompt side of things, is like the context windows are growing. And I think, the larger the context window, the more opportunity in that prompt you have to really like, fine tune that response and output. And every use case is a little different on how much you even need to do this, right? But I think there's a little bit of a trade-off too with, there's more costly upfront to do, to fine tune and kind of go down that path, doing more of the fine tuning approach, but maybe cheaper as you don't have to send as much into the prompts. So cheaper maybe from a per, number of API tokens or number of tokens you're using. And so I think there's some trade-offs and some nuance to those decisions that, really it's important in the discovery process that, we mentioned earlier in this kind of, initial opportunity and proof of concept. That's the point where you want to sort of assess those things and figure out, is it better to go down a fine tuning path? Is it better to go down more of a prompt, few shot example type of path? And it really does depend on the situation, I would say. But by and large, so far, we've been pretty successful on the prompt side of things. So it looks like we have one final question. Do we want to take a stab at it? What do companies need to do to prepare their data and or documents to make it available for AI? Are there any best practices that you've seen? So I guess I can take a stab at this one, Brennan, and then feel free to jump in. One thing that I've noticed is like, I think a lot of technology leaders have been advocating within their organization to do data cleanup type of projects, or to be able to get more standardization and centralization of information. And oftentimes it's hard to get budget for those types of projects in isolation. I think what I'm seeing with AI is it starts to become more of a conversation of, oh, we sort of need to do those things to then be able to get these benefits that we're seeing other companies getting with AI. And so I think it's really making those budgeting conversations a little easier for technology leaders to say, hey, I know you really want to have this experience where you can go ask questions of an AI who has that knowledge of our whole proprietary data set, could really help you identify opportunities in the business, or you really want to have that more personalized experience. But to do that, we need to like actually get our CRM to a good point, or we need to actually get a central database that is our source of truth for information about our customers. And so I definitely think that there is work that needs to be done in terms of data, standardization and quality and things like that to help these AIs be successful. And frankly, the AI opportunities and use cases can often serve as really good business value justification for some of those projects where in isolation, they maybe don't get executives, super excited. So I don't know if you have anything else to add on this one, Brennan, but that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with your sentiments. I mean, particularly on the document side of things, I know this maybe sounds a little like silly, but like know where they are and have them like be somewhat organized or like tagged in a way that is serviceable. Because I think that like with a lot of these use cases, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing, like all my data is in exposed AI or none of it is. There can be like a subset of the data that is very focused around a certain like set of context that can be quite powerful. The example we ran through earlier with like the technical user manuals, like I'd imagine a company that has those probably has a lot of other data too that's could be relevant to an AI tool, but there's still a lot of merit in just having a subset of the data or documents, maybe in that case, like available to the AI. So I think in addition to the stuff Ryan mentioned, just sort of thinking about, for the use case we're targeting, like what information would it really even need? And if it doesn't need certain information, maybe that's an opportunity to sort of narrow the focus on like sort of the data cleanup, like where that effort best lies. Because, it's probably a big initiative, especially for companies that, have been compiling or like building, these data sets out intentionally or not, like over a long period of time. So it can be quite a big initiative with like, a dangling carrot of value in the future. So it's helpful to sort of break down your data set and documents to know which ones might be most relevant for a use case and potentially like narrow the focus in that way where it's like, hey, we don't need all of our documents cleaned up, but like all of our user manuals are organized in a way that the AI can pick this up. And boom, we have this like support tool for field agents. Like that use case just got unlocked. And we'll keep going with the other data cleanup as well in the future and unlock even more use cases. So yeah, just kind of like breaking down the problem.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the time we have. We're right up against the hour. So, thank you everybody for joining today. We really appreciate the time. If you'd like to chat about any of this, definitely, feel free to reach out. This is my passion. I love chatting with companies about this. So don't feel shy. Definitely reach out. Yeah, thanks so much for the time. Brendan, thanks for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good times. Take care, everyone.